It was one of those mornings where the world felt crisp and clear, as if life itself had hit the refresh button. The sunlight streamed through my office window, warming the room and casting long shadows across my desk. Rivers Security Solutions was humming along smoothly, with the faint hum of chatter and the clack of keyboards filling the building. I leaned back in my chair, scanning the quarterly reports in front of me, feeling a rare moment of calm. Then came the knock on my door. "Come in," I called, expecting my assistant, but it was Logan Brooks, my attorney and close confidant. His expression was unusually grim as he closed the door behind him and sat across from me without waiting for an invitation. "Ethan," he began, folding his hands tightly, "we need to talk about the Bennett family." A twinge of unease stirred in my gut. Logan wasn't the type to exaggerate or bring up concerns without cause. Still, I forced a calm smile. "What about them? You're not going to start doubting Ava too, are you?" "I don't doubt her," he replied carefully. "But her family? That's another story. The Bennett name carries a long history of, let's say, questionable activities. The crash that killed Judge Harper and his wife 5 years ago? Bennett involvement. Smuggling charges from a decade ago? Bennett ties. Ethan, are you sure you know who you're dealing with?" I sighed, leaning forward. "Logan, I know Ava's family isn't perfect, but she's not like them. She's different. I trust her." Logan didn't look convinced. He tapped his fingers on the arm of the chair, his silence saying more than words ever could. "Look," I said, leaning forward, "Ava's been nothing but honest with me. If her family has skeletons in their closet, that's on them, not her." But even as I defended her, a sliver of doubt crept in. It was fleeting, but it was there. And, as fate would have it, that doubt was about to grow roots. The first hint came later that day. Chloe Morgan, Ava's assistant, had dropped by my office to deliver a file Ava had forgotten at home. Chloe was always polite, always professional, but today something was off. She seemed jumpy, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the folder. "Thanks, Chloe," I said, taking the file. "Everything okay?" She froze, her smile faltering for just a moment. "Oh yes, just a lot on my plate lately." "Take it easy," I replied, trying to lighten the mood. "Ava's lucky to have you." That seemed to make her even more uncomfortable. She gave a quick nod and practically bolted from the room. I watched her go, a frown tugging at the corners of my mouth. What's eating at her? That evening, I returned home to find Ava on the phone. Her tone was hushed, urgent, and she ended the call abruptly when she noticed me. "Hey, sweetheart," she greeted, her voice slipping into its usual warmth. "How was your day?" "Good," I replied, brushing off the oddity. "Yours?" "Busy as always," she said, flashing her perfect smile. "Just some family stuff to sort out." Family stuff. That seemed to be the go-to excuse for everything. I let it go, but something about her demeanor lingered in my mind. The way she avoided meeting my eyes, the way her hands fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. Ava had always been composed, poised. Tonight she seemed restless. Across town, Detective Paige Turner was revisiting a case that had haunted her for years. The file on Judge Harper and his wife's fatal car crash lay open on her desk, photos and reports scattered around it. "Bennett family," she murmured to herself, tapping her pen against her chin. "It always circles back to them." She reached for her coffee, taking a long sip as she scanned the reports again. There had always been whispers about the Bennett's involvement in the crash, but nothing concrete. Just like the smuggling operation they were rumored to run, or the offshore accounts they allegedly used to launder money. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every witness conveniently disappeared. But now, with a new source feeding her fresh information, Paige felt closer to the truth than ever before. And the name Ethan Rivers had popped up in connection with her investigation. A name she hadn't expected. Unbeknownst to me, Ava's seemingly perfect world was anything but. While I trusted her implicitly, she was working in the shadows, orchestrating a plan so intricate it felt like a game of chess. Her brothers, Caleb and Darren, had always been the masterminds behind the family's schemes. But Ava had outgrown her role as the obedient little sister. Now she was pulling the strings. "We'll use river security to our advantage," Ava told Caleb during a hushed meeting at a dimly lit cafe. "Ethan's resources can cover our tracks. He trusts me. He won't see it coming." Caleb smirked, raising his glass in a mock toast. "You always were the clever one." Back at home, I was blissfully unaware of the trap closing around me. Instead, I spent the evening going over security plans for a new client, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had been following me all day. That's when the second hint dropped. I noticed a notification on my phone. An email from Chloe, sent after hours. It wasn't her usual professional tone. Subject: urgent. Something you need to know. Mr. Rivers, I don't know how to say this, but there's something going on you need to be aware of. It's about Ava. I've seen things I can't ignore. Please call me. The words hit me like a gut punch. As I read and reread Chloe's email, the questions swirled in my mind. What was she trying to tell me? What had she seen? And why couldn't she just say it outright? I glanced at the clock. It was late, but not too late to make a call. My finger hovered over the dial button when Ava walked into the room, startling me. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice casual, but her eyes sharp. I hesitated. "Just work stuff." Her smile returned, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through my fingers. There was a crack in the foundation of my life, and I didn't know how deep it ran. And just as I drifted off to sleep, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Detective Paige Turner. We need to talk. It's about the Bennetts." The trap was tightening, and I didn't even know I was the prey. The Bennett estate was a sight to behold that night. Its sprawling gardens lit by delicate string lights, glowing lanterns, and chandeliers suspended from towering oaks. The air buzzed with the sound of clinking glasses and the hum of polite laughter. Guests dressed to the nines mingled in curated perfection, celebrating what they believed was the union of two successful families. For me, it was a whirlwind of handshakes, smiles, and congratulations. Ava was radiant in her emerald green dress, her smile dazzling as she flitted between guests like a butterfly, charming everyone she encountered. She was the image of a devoted fiancé. But something about the evening felt off. The first clue came early. I noticed Ava's brothers, Caleb and Darren, stationed at opposite ends of the party, their eyes scanning the crowd like hawks. They weren't mingling, barely exchanging words with anyone unless approached. It wasn't unusual for them to be guarded. They had a reputation for being cautious, but tonight, their vigilance was unnerving. "Enjoying yourself?" Ava's voice broke my thoughts. "Of course," I said, slipping into the role of the doting fiancé. "You've outdone yourself, Ava." She smiled, touching my arm lightly, but there was something behind her eyes, a glimmer of calculation I couldn't quite place. As the night wore on, the subtle cracks became more pronounced. Chloe Morgan was there, despite rarely attending events like this. She looked out of place, her movements stiff as if she were walking on eggshells. At one point, I caught her watching Ava from a distance, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Chloe," I called, stepping away from a conversation. "Everything okay?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to Ava, who was laughing with a group of guests. "I'm fine," she said, her voice low, "just a bit overwhelmed." Before I could press further, she slipped away into the crowd. Then came the speech. Ava took the microphone, her voice ringing out with practiced ease as she welcomed our guests. She spoke of love, trust, and the future we were building together. The crowd cheered and applauded, but her words didn't land quite right. They felt rehearsed, hollow. "Tonight is not just a celebration," she said, her eyes locking with mine. "It's a promise of what's to come." Her gaze lingered for a second too long, and my stomach twisted. That's when it happened. A man in the crowd, someone I didn't recognize, stepped forward, holding up his phone. "Is this your idea of trust, Ethan?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the man as he played a video on his phone. The footage showed me in a compromising position with a woman I didn't recognize. Grainy but damning. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That's not me," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "This is fake." Before I could explain further, Caleb stepped forward, his face a mask of righteous anger. "You've been playing my sister?" he growled. "After everything she's done for you?" "I didn't." Darren cut me off, shoving me hard enough to make me stumble. "You're a disgrace," he spat. What happened next was a blur. Caleb and Darren moved with the precision of trained fighters. Before I could fully react, Darren's fist connected with my jaw, sending me reeling. I barely had time to regain my footing before Caleb landed a blow to my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. Guests screamed and backed away, forming a loose circle around us. Ava stood at the center, her expression a mix of fury and heartbreak, her hands covering her mouth as if she couldn't believe what was happening. It was all a performance, and she was the star. The assault was brutal. By the time they were done, I was on the ground, blood dripping from my nose and mouth, pain radiating through my body. Caleb stood over me, breathing hard. "You don't deserve her," he snarled. Before I could reply, Darren added, "Consider this a warning." Through the haze of pain, I caught a glimpse of Chloe, her phone angled discreetly toward the scene. She was recording. The party ended in chaos. I was helped out by a few guests, though most avoided eye contact, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Ava stayed behind, no doubt playing the grieving fiancé, spinning the story to protect her family's reputation. But one person didn't leave immediately. Detective Paige Turner had been at the party, blending in as just another guest. She'd seen everything, her sharp eyes catching details most would miss. She lingered near the edge of the crowd, her phone buzzing as she texted someone. Her investigation into the Bennetts had just gained a critical new piece of evidence. At home, the pain of my injuries was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. The betrayal was overwhelming, a storm I couldn't outrun. I replayed the events in my mind, trying to piece together how I hadn't seen it coming. Ava's words echoed in my head. "It's a promise of what's to come." She'd meant every word. But as I sat there, the anger began to take shape. I wasn't just a victim of their schemes. I was Ethan Rivers, a Navy SEAL who had faced worse odds and survived. The Bennetts thought they'd broken me, that they'd taken everything I had. They were wrong. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my counterattack. The world swirled in a haze of white walls and antiseptic as I opened my eyes to the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. My body screamed in protest, each bruise and fracture a painful reminder of the ambush. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by a sea of machines and wires, but the real battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. A nurse entered, offering a kind smile. "Good to see you awake, Mr. Rivers. The doctor will be in shortly." I nodded weakly, feigning exhaustion. Let them believe I was just another patient on the mend. It was safer that way. But beneath the surface, my mind was anything but still. The first step was assembling the right people. A soft knock at the door signaled the arrival of Logan Brooks, my lawyer and longtime friend. He entered quietly, his face a mix of concern and determination. "Logan," I rasped, my voice hoarse. "Ethan," he replied, sitting in the chair beside me. "I got here as soon as I could. How are you holding up?" I gave him a faint smile. "Better than I look." Logan leaned in, lowering his voice. "We need to talk. Chloe sent me some recordings. You're not going to believe this." While the world outside thought I was licking my wounds, I was using every ounce of my energy to plan. Logan played the audio recordings Chloe had managed to capture during the engagement party. Snippets of conversations that painted a damning picture. Ava's voice was clear, cold, and calculating. "Ethan's resources will help us, Caleb. I've got him wrapped around my finger. He won't see this coming." Caleb's reply was just as chilling. "And once we're done, we'll bury him." Figuratively, of course. Each word hit me like a punch to the gut, but it wasn't enough to crush me. It was fuel. I asked Logan to bring in Sophia Carter, my tech expert and someone I trusted with my life. She arrived late that evening, a laptop under one arm and a steely resolve in her eyes. "Ethan," she greeted, her voice soft but steady. "I heard what happened. I'm here to help." Together, we began piecing together the puzzle. Sophia worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she analyzed Chloe's recordings, financial records, and Ava's digital footprint. What she uncovered was worse than I had imagined. The Bennetts weren't just corrupt. They were running a full-scale operation of bribery, fraud, and blackmail. And Ava wasn't a pawn in their game. She was the queen, orchestrating every move with surgical precision. But Ava wasn't just targeting me. Sophia discovered links to Liam Harper, the son of Judge Harper, whose suspicious death years ago had haunted me. Liam, once an ally, had gone dark after his parents' demise. Now, it seemed he was a wild card in Ava's scheme, motivated by revenge and greed. "She's playing all sides," Sophia said, shaking her head. "Ava's using Liam's vendetta to distract the authorities while she consolidates power." Logan crossed his arms, his expression grim. "And you're her ticket to legitimacy. With River's security under her control, she can expand her operations globally." I clenched my fists, anger burning away the pain in my body. She won't get away with this. The days passed in a blur of strategy and recovery. I played the role of the weakened victim well, keeping my condition under wraps while plotting my counteroffensive. Logan worked to secure legal protections, ensuring that when the time came, we could strike without hesitation. Meanwhile, Sophia tapped into the Bennetts' encrypted communications, uncovering more details of their operations. Every conversation, every transaction painted a clearer picture of their web of deceit. But the most critical piece of evidence came from Detective Paige Turner. She visited me late one night, her presence as quiet as a shadow. "I've been following the Bennetts for years," she said, placing a thick folder on my bedside table. "What happened to you was a message. They wanted to show you who's in control." I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the photos and reports. It was all their ties to the Harper crash, their smuggling network, and the names of those they had silenced. Turner leaned in, her voice low. "But they made a mistake. They underestimated you." As I healed, I began to think like the Navy SEAL I once was. Ava's arrogance and her family's overconfidence were their greatest weaknesses. They believed they were untouchable, that no one could outmaneuver them. But I wasn't just anyone. One evening, as the city's lights flickered outside my hospital window, Logan and Sophia outlined the plan. "We'll need to hit them from all sides," Sophia said, her tone measured. "Expose their operations, turn their allies against them, and use their own arrogance against them." "And Liam?" I asked. Logan's expression darkened. "He's volatile, but we might be able to use that. If we can convince him Ava's manipulating him." Sophia nodded. "He could be the key to dismantling their network." The final piece came from Chloe. She met with us in secret, her courage shining through her nervous demeanor. "I've got more recordings," she said, handing me a flash drive. "And financial records Ava asked me to manage. I kept copies just in case." Something felt off. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than you know, Chloe." "Thank you." She nodded, her eyes misting. "I just want to see justice served." As the pieces fell into place, I felt the tide turning. The Bennetts had drawn first blood, but they had no idea what was coming. As I stood for the first time since the attack, pain shooting through my body, I stared at my reflection in the hospital window. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival, about protecting what I'd built, about proving that no one, not even Ava Bennett, could break me. The trap was set, and this time I was the one pulling the strings. The warehouse was a relic from another time, its walls weathered and rust-streaked, standing in defiance of the bustling city skyline in the distance. Inside, the dim lighting cast long shadows over crates and scaffolding, creating an atmosphere that was equal parts foreboding and calculated. This was the stage for my plan, a plan months in the making. Every detail had been scrutinized, every possibility accounted for. Tonight, it wasn't just about justice. It was about exposing the Bennetts for who they truly were and making sure they never hurt anyone again. Liam Harper arrived first, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion as he stepped through the heavy steel doors. "Ethan," he greeted, his tone cautious. "What's this about?" I gestured to the table at the center of the room, where a stack of carefully planted documents awaited. "We need to talk. About Ava. About your parents. About the Bennetts." His eyes narrowed, but he approached. "What are you playing at?" "Not a game," I said, sliding the top folder toward him. "The truth." As Liam flipped through the documents, his guarded expression shifted to one of shock and anger. The files detailed Ava's manipulation of him, her plans to pit him against me, and the Bennetts' role in the car crash that killed his parents. "They set your family up, Liam," I said, my voice steady. "Ava used your pain to pull you into their web. They've been playing all of us." His hands trembled as he read, each page unraveling the lies he'd believed for years. "You're lying," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" I leaned closer. "You've seen how they operate. You know they're capable of this." He looked at me, a storm brewing in his eyes. "If this is true, you'll have your proof soon enough," I replied. The sound of tires screeching outside signaled the arrival of the Bennetts. I straightened, my heart pounding in anticipation. Ava entered first, her brothers flanking her like bodyguards. She wore her confidence like armor, her eyes cold and calculating as they scanned the room. "Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "A warehouse? How quaint." Caleb and Darren followed close behind, their postures tense. They were ready for a fight, but so was I. "This is where it ends," I said, stepping back to create space between us. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Ends? Darling, this is where we take control." For a moment, the room was thick with tension. Then, without warning, Liam slammed the folder onto the table, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. "You used me," he growled, his voice shaking with fury. "You used my parents' deaths to manipulate me. All of you." Ava turned to him, her mask of confidence slipping for the first time. "Liam, it's not what it looks like." "Don't," he snapped, pointing a finger at her. "Don't lie to me again." Chaos erupted. Liam demanded answers, Ava tried to regain control, and Caleb and Darren moved closer to me, their intentions clear. But this was exactly what I'd planned for. A sharp whistle cut through the commotion, and the warehouse lights brightened, revealing a team of my allies positioned at strategic points around the room. Federal agents emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn, while former victims of the Bennetts stepped forward, their presence a silent testimony to the family's crimes. Ava froze, her eyes darting between the agents and me. "What is this?" I smirked. "The end of your little empire." As the agents moved in, Caleb and Darren reacted predictably with violence. Caleb lunged at me, his fist swinging, but I sidestepped, his momentum sending him crashing into a stack of crates. Darren reached for a concealed weapon, but an agent disarmed him in seconds, pinning him to the ground. Ava stood frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Ethan, please," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "Don't," I said coldly. "You made your choice." In the chaos, Chloe emerged, her phone raised to capture every moment. The footage was damning. Caleb and Darren's aggression, Ava's panicked attempts to talk her way out, and the agents methodically dismantling the Bennett's operation. It was over. Detective Paige Turner stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Ava Bennett, Caleb Bennett, Darren Bennett, you're all under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder." Ava's composure shattered. "You can't do this. You have no proof." I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "We have more than enough. Every lie, every crime, it's all documented, including your role in the Harper's deaths." Her eyes widened in horror. "No. No, that wasn't me." "Save it," Turner said, snapping handcuffs onto Ava's wrists. As the Bennetts were led away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was over, and justice was finally being served. Ava turned to me one last time, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and despair. You think you've won, Ethan? This isn't over. I met her gaze, unflinching. Oh, it's over. For you. As she disappeared into the night, I looked around at the team who had made this possible. Logan, Sophia, Chloe, and Turner. All of them had played a part in dismantling the Bennett's empire. This wasn't just a victory. It was a new beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of anticipation, a tension so palpable it seemed to cling to the walls. The Bennetts, Ava, Caleb, and Darren, sat at the defendant's table, their once pristine confidence shattered. Ava's sharp gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape route that no longer existed. Caleb and Darren looked sullen, their usual bravado dulled by the weight of the charges against them. The trial was about to begin, and the world was watching. The prosecution wasted no time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor began, stepping forward with the calm authority of someone who knew they held a winning hand. What we will present in this trial is not just a case of financial crimes or corruption. This is about manipulation, betrayal, and greed on a scale that defies comprehension. The Bennetts used their influence to exploit the vulnerable, subvert justice, and, in the case of Judge Harper and his wife, cost innocent lives. The jury's eyes were fixed on the prosecutor, their attention unwavering. Chloe Morgan was the first to take the stand. She looked nervous but determined as she raised her right hand, swore the oath, and sat down. I watched from the gallery, silently willing her to stay strong. Chloe had risked everything to bring the Bennetts down, and now her courage was on full display. Ms. Morgan, the prosecutor began, can you tell us about your role within the Bennett's organization? Chloe took a deep breath. I was Ava Bennett's assistant. My job was to handle her schedule, manage her correspondence, and eventually process financial records that I didn't fully understand at the time. And when did you begin to suspect wrongdoing? Chloe hesitated, her eyes flicking toward Ava, who glared at her with icy disdain. About a year ago, I started noticing discrepancies in the accounts Ava asked me to manage. Money was being funneled into offshore accounts through fake charities and environmental organizations. The prosecutor handed Chloe a document. Is this one of the records you provided to the authorities? Chloe nodded. Yes, it's proof of the laundering scheme. The evidence piled up. The prosecution introduced bank statements, shell company records, and emails tying Ava directly to the fraudulent schemes. Witnesses from Ava's supposed environmental initiatives testified, revealing how they had been duped into fronting for her crimes. A forensic accountant detailed how the Bennett's wealth had grown through bribery and blackmail, their financial empire built on the backs of innocent people. But the most damning testimony came from Liam Harper. When he took the stand, the tension in the room escalated. He avoided eye contact with the Bennetts as he settled into his seat, his hands gripping the edges of the chair. Mr. Harper, the prosecutor began, can you explain your involvement with the Bennetts? Liam's jaw tightened. I worked with them because I thought they were helping me get justice for my parents. Ava made me believe she cared, but it was all a lie. He took a deep breath and continued. The Bennetts were responsible for my parents' deaths. Judge Harper was investigating their smuggling operation and planned to expose them. So they orchestrated the crash. I didn't know the full extent of their involvement until Ethan Rivers showed me the evidence. The gallery erupted into whispers, and the judge pounded the gavel for silence. Ava's lawyer attempted to cross-examine Liam, but his resolve held firm. You were coerced into testifying, weren't you? The defense attorney pressed. No, Liam replied, his voice steady. I'm here because it's the truth. Ava and her brothers manipulated me, just like they manipulated everyone else. His words struck like a hammer, leaving no doubt about the Bennetts' guilt. As the trial progressed, the prosecution revealed the extent of Ava's manipulation. She had not only used Liam as a pawn, but had also orchestrated her brother's involvement in the more violent aspects of their operation, ensuring her hands appeared clean. Emails and text messages painted a picture of a woman who thrived on control, using charm and intelligence to outmaneuver her enemies and allies alike. Her betrayal of Liam, her family, and even her former business partners became the centerpiece of the trial, exposing her as the true architect of their empire's corruption. Public opinion turned swiftly. News outlets covered the trial with fervor, broadcasting the sordid details of the Bennett's crimes. Former victims came forward, sharing their stories of how the family had ruined their lives. Rivers Security Solutions, the company they had tried to destroy, became a beacon of hope and justice. Under Sophia Carter's leadership, it expanded its efforts to protect vulnerable communities and assist law enforcement in dismantling criminal networks. In the final days of the trial, the defense attempted to shift blame, painting Ava as a victim of her brother's schemes. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor's closing argument drove the point home. The Bennetts thought they were untouchable, that they could manipulate anyone and escape accountability. But today we have shown the truth. Their greed, their lies, their betrayal. They have left a trail of destruction that ends here. Justice demands a verdict of guilty. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted in applause. Ava's face remained expressionless, but her clenched fists betrayed her frustration. Caleb and Darren exchanged defeated glances, their bravado finally extinguished. As I left the courthouse, a wave of relief washed over me. The Bennett's empire had crumbled, and their victims could finally begin to heal. I turned to Sophia, who had been by my side through it all. "We did it," she smiled. "You did it, Ethan. You never gave up." In the weeks that followed, I dedicated myself to bringing peace to those the Bennetts had hurt. Chloe continued to work with Rivers Security, her bravery inspiring others to stand up against corruption. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. The Bennetts had fallen, but the lessons remained. Trust was fragile, and justice required vigilance. And while the scars of betrayal would never fully fade, they served as a reminder of what I'd overcome, and the strength it had taken to prevail. The Bennett estate, once a monument to power and opulence, was unrecognizable. The sprawling mansion that had loomed over the city, as a symbol of fear and excess, now buzzed with an entirely different energy. Volunteers moved through its halls, carrying supplies and setting up programs aimed at helping victims of organized crime. It was poetic, almost poetic, how the very symbol of the Bennett's corruption had been transformed into a sanctuary of hope. Emma Harper stood beside me, her arms crossed as we surveyed the progress. The grand ballroom, once the site of extravagant parties where deals were whispered and secrets traded, was now filled with makeshift counseling stations and resource tables. "I still can't believe this is happening," she said, her voice soft.
I glanced her, smiling faintly.
"It's a start. There's a long way to go, but this feels right." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the weight of everything we'd endured seemed to lighten. We had both lost so much. Emma, her parents, and me, the life I thought I'd built with Ava. But in their place, we had found a shared purpose: rebuilding what the Bennetts had destroyed. The funds seized from the Bennetts' accounts were staggering. Years of ill-gotten gains had been repurposed into something meaningful. Rehabilitation programs were launched for those coerced into criminal activity, and scholarships were established for children affected by organized crime. Sophia Carter spearheaded many of these initiatives, her tech expertise ensuring the programs were efficient and secure. "This is just the beginning," she said during a meeting in the former Bennett dining room, now converted into an administrative office. "We're going to make sure every penny they stole is used to help people." Detective Paige Turner became a regular visitor to the Mansion Turn Shelter, her investigative skills now focused on preventing future cases like the Bennetts. She had become a symbol of justice, her efforts widely recognized for exposing the family's corruption. "I never thought I'd see the day," she admitted during one of her visits. "The Bennetts were untouchable for so long, but now, they're just another cautionary tale." Chloe Morgan, too, had found a new purpose. Working with Sophia and me, she helped manage the programs funded by the Bennett's assets. Her courage during the trial had inspired others to come forward, turning her into an unexpected advocate for survivors. Sometimes, she said one evening, I still hear Ava's voice in my head, questioning my every move. But then I see what we've accomplished, and it's worth it. For Ava, the transformation of her family's legacy was a bitter pill. From her prison cell, she could only watch as the Bennett's name was erased, replaced by stories of resilience and justice. The mansion where she had once reigned was now a place she would never see again, its grandeur repurposed for a cause she had worked so hard to suppress. Her isolation deepened when Olivia Reyes, her former friend and now Liam's wife, visited her. "You lost, Ava?" Olivia said, her tone sharp but tinged with pity. "Everything you manipulated, every life you ruined, it's all been undone. The Bennetts are nothing now. And you're just a reminder of what happens when greed blinds you." Ava said nothing, her silence the only shield she had left. The bonds between those of us who had fought against the Bennetts grew stronger. Emma and I, in particular, found solace in our shared mission. One afternoon, as we worked on a plan to expand the shelter's services, she paused, looking at me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "You know," she said, "this is exactly what my parents would have wanted, to help people, to make a difference." I nodded, feeling the same sense of fulfillment. And it's exactly what the Bennetts never understood. Power isn't about control or fear. It's about what you can do for others. As weeks turned into months, the mansion became a hub of activity. Its reputation transformed completely. Schools sent students on field trips to learn about the dangers of corruption and the importance of standing up for justice. Former victims of the Bennetts returned as volunteers, eager to pay it forward. Through it all, I found myself healing. The scars Ava and her family had left were still there, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as a reminder of the strength it had taken to fight back and the resilience that had carried me through. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood on the mansion's balcony, the noise of the bustling shelter below carrying on the breeze. Emma joined me, her presence grounding and steady. "We did something good here," she said. I looked at her, gratitude filling my chest. We did. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. The Bennetts' reign was over. Their wealth had been turned into a force for good, their mansion a beacon of hope. And as I looked toward the horizon, I knew the future was brighter. For me, for Emma, and for everyone touched by their destruction. The ruins had become a foundation, and from them we were building something that would last. The city had changed in the decades since the Bennetts fell. Their sprawling empire of corruption and greed was now a distant memory, replaced by something brighter and more enduring. I stood at the edge of a newly constructed park, watching as children played on swings and families gathered for picnics. It was hard to believe this land had once been tied to one of the Bennetts' many schemes. Now it was a symbol of what could rise from the ashes of betrayal, a legacy of justice and hope. Emma Harper's trauma unit had become a global model for victim care. Inside the gleaming building, walls lined with artwork created by survivors, Emma oversaw a team of the most dedicated professionals I'd ever seen. Her work was groundbreaking, integrating physical, emotional, and psychological care for those recovering from violence and exploitation. The Bennetts took so much from so many, Emma had told me during the unit's opening ceremony. We can't undo the past, but we can give people their futures back. Her words stayed with me. Every decision I made was rooted in that principle. The Ethan Rivers Foundation had become my life's work. What had started as a small initiative to repurpose the Bennetts' assets had grown into a powerhouse for change. We transformed seized properties into shelters, schools, and training centers. Funds once hidden in offshore accounts now supported scholarships, healthcare programs, and legal aid for those fighting systemic corruption. Sophia Carter managed the Foundation's operations with the precision and dedication that had made her invaluable during our fight against the Bennetts. Her ability to harness technology for good ensured that every initiative was effective and sustainable. Even former allies of the Bennetts had found redemption. Lucas Navarro, once a cunning strategist in the Bennetts network, had turned his skills to dismantling other criminal organizations. His insight into their operations was invaluable, and his personal journey of atonement inspired others to step forward and leave behind lives of crime. "It's not about erasing what I did," Lucas said during a Foundation gala. "It's about using what I know to make sure no one else goes through what the Bennetts put people through." Ava Bennett, however, remained a shadow of her former self. In a maximum security prison, she lived in isolation, cut off from the power and control that had once defined her. Letters sent to her by former allies went unanswered, and attempts to appeal her sentence were repeatedly denied. One visit from Olivia Reyes, now a respected advocate for victims of financial crimes, had made the news. "You were brilliant, Ava," Olivia had told her, according to reports. "You could have changed the world for the better. But you only thought of yourself. Now you're forgotten." The bitterness that had consumed Ava was a cautionary tale in its own right. As the years passed, my team became family. Chloe Morgan continued her advocacy, helping survivors navigate the complex legal and emotional aftermath of crime. Detective Paige Turner had risen through the ranks, her efforts leading to the arrests of countless criminals who once believed themselves untouchable. Together, we celebrated our victories, knowing they were hard-won. One evening, during a Foundation anniversary event, I stood before a room filled with people whose lives had been changed by our work. Emma stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her presence as steadying as ever. "This isn't about one person," I said, addressing the crowd. "It's about all of us, about what we can achieve when we refuse to let fear or betrayal define us. The Bennett's empire is gone, but the strength and resilience of those they hurt live on. That's the legacy we've built together." The room erupted into applause, but even amidst the celebration, I remained vigilant. The fight for justice was never truly over. As the event wound down, Emma and I walked through the park, the cool night air filled with the sounds of laughter and music from the festival nearby. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked, her voice soft. "The Bennetts," I replied. She nodded. "Sometimes," I admitted, not out of anger or regret, more as a reminder. They thought they were invincible, that their lies would last forever. They underestimated the power of truth, of integrity. And that's why they lost. She smiled, her hand slipping into mine. "You turned their worst into something extraordinary, Ethan. That's what matters." As we stood there, the park lights casting long shadows, I felt a deep sense of peace. The scars of the past had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. The Bennetts were gone. Their empire was dismantled, their name reduced to a warning, their power extinguished. But the legacy of justice and empowerment we had built in their place, that would endure. And as long as I had breath in my body, I would protect it. Always.